The evening air was turning sharp, carrying the kind of damp chill that seeps through thin fabric and settles deep in your bones. The city lights were beginning to blink on, painting the wet pavement in streaks of gold and blue, reflecting the sky that was fading from orange to a deep, dusty purple. In the middle of this bustling world of warmth and hurried footsteps stood two small figures, an island of stillness in a river of motion. They were twin girls, perhaps 10 years old, with the same wide, dark eyes and the same serious expression on their faces. They were a mirror image, right down to the scuff marks on their worn-out shoes. And the way their shoulders were hunched against the cold, they shared a single, thin coat that was too big for both of them, the sleeves rolled up several times over their small hands. It was a flimsy shield against the autumn wind that whipped around the corners of the tall glass buildings. In front of them, on the cold concrete, sat an open, empty guitar case. It wasn't for a guitar, though. It was for hope. The older twin, if only by a few minutes, held a small, battered ukulele. Her fingers, red from the cold, moved carefully over the frets. She was the anchor, the steady beat. Her sister stood just beside her, her hands tucked into the oversized pockets of their shared coat, her gaze scanning the faces that rushed past them. They didn't look at the people with begging eyes. They weren't asking for pity. They were offering something. A deep breath passed between them, a silent signal they had practiced 100 times. The older twin strummed a few simple chords, the sound a little thin in the open air, but clear and true. And then they began to sing. Their voices, when they came, were a startling surprise. It was a sound that didn't belong on a cold, lonely street. It was pure and clear, a two-part harmony that seemed to weave itself into the fabric of the city noise, making the traffic hum and the distant sirens fade into the background. Their song was a simple one, a folk melody about a bird finding its way home, but the way they sang it filled it with a haunting beauty. It was the sound of innocence, but with an undercurrent of a deep, quiet longing that resonated with anyone who stopped to listen, the younger twin. Her eyes still moving from face to face, was the one who felt the hunger most acutely. It was a hollow ache inside her, a constant reminder of why they were there. She could smell the delicious aromas drifting from the nearby restaurants, the rich scent of roasting garlic, the sweet smell of baking bread, the warm, savory aroma of simmering soups. Each smell was a tiny torture, a painting of a world they couldn't enter. She watched a well-dressed couple laugh as they pushed open a heavy wooden door, the warmth from inside spilling out for a brief moment before the door swung shut again. She imagined them sitting at a table, a hot meal placed before them, and she pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the music. Her sister's voice beside her was a lifeline, a reminder of their purpose. They were a team. They were doing this together. The older twin felt the weight of the ukulele in her hands, the press of the cold strings against her fingertips. She focused on the chords, on the rhythm, on making sure her voice stayed strong. She felt the eyes of the people on them, and a part of her wanted to shrink away, to hide. But she couldn't. She thought of her parents at home, their faces etched with a worry that no child should have to see. She thought of the pile of bills on the kitchen table and the hushed, tense conversations that stopped when she and her sister walked into the room. Singing was the only thing she could do. It was the one thing she had that could help. So she sang with all her heart, pouring every ounce of her love for her family into the melody, hoping the people walking by could hear it. At first, most people just hurried past. They were wrapped up in their own worlds, their own destinations, their own warm dinners waiting for them. A man in a long coat, talking on his phone, didn't even glance their way. A group of teenagers, laughing and shoving each other, walked right through their music as if it were just smoke. But then a few people began to slow down. An elderly woman, her face a map of wrinkles, stopped and tilted her head, a small, sad smile touching her lips. She listened to the entire song, her eyes closed. When it was over, she walked slowly to the guitar case and dropped in a folded bill. It wasn't just money. It was a message. It said, "I hear you. You matter." The twins' eyes met for a fleeting second, a spark of gratitude passing between them. A young couple, holding hands, stopped to listen. The girl pulled out her phone and recorded a short video, a look of wonder on her face. They didn't put any money in the case, but their attention felt like a small victory. A few more people dropped in coins. The soft clink of metal against the worn felt lining was the only applause they needed. Each coin was a step closer. A step closer to a full belly, a step closer to easing the worry on their parents' faces. It wasn't $1 million, but it was something. It was a start. They finished their song, and the silence that followed felt heavy and full. The older twin took another deep breath, her fingers finding the strings again, ready to start a new melody. The night was young, and they had a long way to go before they could go home. The city had its own rhythm, a constant beat of life that the twins had learned to sing along with. But a new sound suddenly cut through their melody, a deep, purring rumble that was so out of place it felt like a predator entering a peaceful meadow. A long black car, as sleek and dark as a panther, glided to a stop at the curb right in front of them. It was so clean and polished that it seemed to swallow the colorful city lights reflecting off its surface. The twins' song faltered for just a moment, a tiny skip in the heartbeat of their music. They looked at each other, a flicker of something new in their eyes, hope. A car like this meant someone with money, someone who might appreciate their talent enough to make a real difference. Not just drop a few coins. The younger twin's grip on her sister's arm tightened. She imagined the door opening and a kind-faced person stepping out, someone who would hear the hunger in their song and understand. Maybe they would offer them a warm meal inside the fancy restaurant, or maybe they would just put a large bill in their case that would mean their parents wouldn't have to worry for a week. It was a fragile hope, a daydream in the cold air, but it was there, shining brightly for a few seconds. The car door opened, not with a creak, but with a soft, expensive click. The sound was followed by a wave of warm air that carried a scent they had never smelled before, a mix of rich leather and a sharp, clean cologne. A man stepped out, and he seemed to fill the space around him. He was dressed in a suit that looked like it had been painted onto his body, the dark fabric perfectly creased. His shoes were so shiny they reflected the twins' own small, shocked faces back at them. He moved with an air of complete ownership, as if the pavement, the street, the very air belonged to him. He paused, one hand on the car door, and his head turned towards the sound of their music. For a moment, the older twin thought she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a sign that he was listening, that he was moved. But the flicker died as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, hard look that made her stomach clench. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the look of a cat that had just spotted a mouse, and it sent a chill down the twins' spines that had nothing to do with the evening air. He didn't walk past them. He walked directly towards them, his polished shoes crunching on the pavement. The small crowd that had gathered to listen fell silent. The friendly, appreciative atmosphere vanished, replaced by a tense, uncomfortable quiet. People shifted on their feet, some looking down at their shoes, others staring with wide, uncertain eyes. The twins felt all those eyes on them, and they suddenly felt very small and exposed. Their song, which had felt so beautiful and strong just moments before, now felt thin and fragile. The man stopped in front of them, looming over their small frames. He looked down at them, not as if they were children, but as if they were something unpleasant he had found on the bottom of his shoe. He reached into his pocket, and the twins held their breath, expecting a wallet, a handful of bills. Instead, he pulled out a single coin. It was a gold coin, and it caught the light with a dull, heavy gleam. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, examining it for a moment as if it were a mere trifle. Then, with a casual, almost lazy flick of his wrist, he tossed the coin into their open guitar case. It didn't land with a soft clink like the other coins. It landed with a heavy, insulting thud, a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. It was a sound of dismissal, not generosity. "Pathetic," he said, his voice loud and clear, cutting through the air like a shard of glass. It was a voice used to giving orders and being obeyed. He looked from one twin to the other, his gaze filled with a mixture of contempt and amusement. "Singing for scraps on the street like a couple of pigeons? Is this what your parents taught you? To beg?" The younger twin felt her face flush with a hot, burning shame. She wanted to shrink, to melt into the pavement and disappear. The words were like physical blows, each one knocking the air out of her lungs. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, and she knew they were all hearing this, all witnessing her humiliation. She dropped her head, her hair falling over her face. A useless curtain against the world, the older twin stood frozen, her fingers still hovering over the strings of her ukulele. She wanted to say something, to defend herself and her sister, but the words were stuck in her throat. All she could do was stare at the man's cold, smiling face. He was enjoying this. He was feeding on their shame. "If you want to make it in this world," he continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "you need to get a real job. Talent is nothing without power. Your little song is a joke. A sad little joke for people to feel sorry for." He gestured vaguely at the few onlookers, who now looked away, embarrassed to be witness to such cruelty. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a loud, conspiratorial whisper that was still audible to everyone. "Let me give you some advice. Stop this pathetic noise. Go home. The world doesn't need any more beggars." With that, he straightened up, smoothed the front of his already perfect suit, and gave them one last dismissive glance. He turned his back on them and walked towards the heavy, ornate door of the restaurant. A doorman, dressed in a uniform with gold buttons, immediately opened it for him. The man swept inside without a backward glance, disappearing into a world of warmth, soft music, and clinking glasses. The door swung shut, and the silence that followed was heavier than any sound. The twins stood motionless, their song completely silenced. The air felt colder than ever, and the friendly city lights now seemed to mock them. The few people who had been watching quickly dispersed, eager to escape the uncomfortable scene. No one looked at the twins. No one said a word. They were alone again, but the feeling was different now. Before, they had been two girls singing for hope. Now they felt like two broken objects left on display. The older twin slowly looked down into the guitar case. Nestled among the few kind coins and crumpled bills was the single, heavy gold coin. It wasn't a gift. It was a brand, a mark of the humiliation they had just suffered. It felt too heavy to pick up. The silence that followed the heavy restaurant door swinging shut was a living thing. It was heavier and colder than the evening air, pressing down on the twins and stealing the breath from their lungs. The city sounds, the traffic and the chatter, seemed to be happening in a different world, a world they were no longer a part of. They stood frozen, two small statues of shame, the older twin still clutching her ukulele as if it were a shield that had failed them. The younger twin kept her head bowed, her hair a curtain hiding her face, but she couldn't hide the small tremor that ran through her body. The crowd that had witnessed their humiliation had evaporated, leaving behind a void that felt accusatory. They were alone with the echo of the man's cruel words and the heavy, insulting thud of the gold coin in their case. The older twin was the first to move, but it was a slow, painful motion. She lowered her ukulele, her fingers feeling stiff and numb. Her eyes fell into the open guitar case. Among the scattered, kind coins and a few folded bills given by people who had truly listened, sat the gold coin. It seemed to glow with a malevolent light, a perfect, heavy circle of scorn. It wasn't money. It was a brand. It was the price of their dignity. She felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but it was quickly swallowed by a wave of helplessness so deep it made her feel sick. What could they do? He was a man in a world of warmth and power, and they were just two children on the cold pavement. The younger twin finally looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She didn't look at her sister, but at the restaurant door. It was a fortress, and the man was safe inside. She felt a single, hot tear escape and trace a path down her cold cheek. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand, angry at herself for crying. Crying was what he would expect. Crying was what weak people did. But she didn't feel strong. She felt hollowed out. The beautiful music they had made just moments ago now felt like a distant memory, a dream that had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. The hunger was back, but it was different now. It was mixed with a bitter taste that had nothing to do with an empty stomach. Just as the older twin was about to reach down and scoop the coins into her pocket, to end this terrible night, a shadow fell over them. She flinched, expecting another cruel face, another sharp word. But when she looked up, she saw a young woman standing there. She wasn't dressed in fancy clothes. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She didn't look rich or powerful. She just looked concerned. She had been sitting at a small table by the window of the cafe across the street, the older twin suddenly remembered. She had been watching them. The young woman took a hesitant step closer, her hands held open and empty in front of her, a gesture meant to show she meant no harm. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice soft and gentle, like a warm blanket in the freezing air. "Don't you listen to a word that man said?" "Not a single word." The twins just stared at her, wary and silent. They had learned that people could be kind, but they had also just learned how quickly they could be cruel. The woman knelt down on the pavement, bringing herself to their eye level. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. She wasn't looking down at them. "Your voices," she continued, her eyes filled with a sincerity that was impossible to fake. "They are incredible, truly. I was listening from across the street, and you have something special. Something beautiful." The younger twin looked at her then, really looked at her. She saw no pity in the woman's eyes, no condescension. She saw only respect. It was a look they hadn't received from anyone else that night, except perhaps from the old woman who had given them a bill. It began to chip away at the wall of shame that had been built around them. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. She took out all the cash she had and placed it carefully into the guitar case, making sure her hand didn't touch the gold coin. It was a quiet, deliberate act. "This is for your music," she said, "because it's worth it." Then she did something unexpected. She pulled out a small card and a pen. "My name is Anya," she said. "I write stories sometimes, and I think people need to hear yours. Not the sad part, but the beautiful part. The part about your singing." The older twin felt a spark of something she couldn't name. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was more like curiosity. This woman, Anya, was the only person who had seen what happened and hadn't run away. "I know this is a strange thing to ask," Anya said, her voice still soft. "But could I talk to your parents? I just want to help. I don't want anything from you. I promise." She looked from one twin to the other, her gaze patient and kind. "I was recording a little bit on my phone before he came. I recorded you singing. I think if people could hear that, they would understand." The twins exchanged a look. It was a silent conversation held in the language they had spoken their whole lives. The older twin's eyes asked, *, "Can we trust her?" The younger twin's eyes answered, *, "I don't know. But what else do we have?" The thought of going home, empty-handed and with the weight of the man's words still on them, was worse than the risk of trusting this one kind stranger. The older twin gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Anya's face softened with relief. She wrote down a phone number on the card and handed it to the older twin. "Have them call me, any time, tonight, tomorrow. It doesn't matter." She stood up. "Go home now. Get warm. You did a brave thing tonight." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the night, leaving the twins with a pocket full of cash, a card with a phone number, and a tiny flicker of a feeling that wasn't shame. It was the faintest glimmer of a possibility. Later that night, huddled in their small apartment, their parents listened in disbelief as the twins told the story, their voices trembling. Their mother held them tight, her own anger and sadness warring with her fear. Their father stared at the card, his jaw tight. To call a stranger was a risk. To not call was to accept that the world was as cruel as the man in the suit had said. After a long silence, he picked up the phone. The next day, Anya met with the family in their small home. She saw the love that filled the tiny space, and she saw the worry etched on the parents' faces. She didn't make any grand promises. She just listened, and then she explained her idea. She would write a short, honest article. And she would post the video she had recorded. The video that started with the pure, beautiful sound of two girls singing on a cold street and ended with the cruel, arrogant actions of one man. She asked for their permission, and after a long talk, they gave it. They were putting their trust in her, and in the power of their daughter's song. That evening, sitting at her small desk in her apartment, Anya looked at the video file on her computer. She watched it one last time, her heart aching for the twins and swelling with pride at their courage. She wrote a few simple words to go with it, focusing on their talent and their spirit, and on the simple, devastating difference between kindness and cruelty. She took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the post button. With a final click, she sent their story out into the world. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain: the world was about to hear the twins sing. Anya pressed the post button and let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The story, the video, was out there in the vast, wild ocean of the internet. For a moment, she felt a pang of anxiety. What if no one saw it? What if it just disappeared into the endless stream of cat videos and celebrity gossip? She checked her phone. A few likes. A comment from her friend saying, "Wow, this is powerful." That was it. She closed her laptop, deciding to let it be. Whatever happened next was out of her hands. She went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. She kept seeing the twins' faces, the man's cruel smile, and the heavy thud of that gold coin. When she woke up the next morning, her phone was buzzing on the nightstand like an angry hornet. Not just one notification, but a constant, non-stop vibration. She fumbled for it, her heart thumping. The screen was a blur of numbers. Thousands of notifications. Her post had been shared thousands of times. The video she had posted had over 100,000 views. She sat up in bed, her sleepiness gone, replaced by a sense of disbelief. She clicked on the video and started reading the comments. They were flooding in, one after another, a river of outrage and support. "Who is this monster? We need to find him." One comment read, "Those girls' voices are angels. Don't let one cruel man silence them," said another. Someone had started a hashtag. It was simple and direct. Hashtag Finch the Tyrant. It was everywhere. People were not just sharing the video. They were adding their own messages of anger at the man and admiration for the twins. The story was no longer hers. It belonged to the world, and the world was furious. Meanwhile, in a small, quiet apartment, the twins' mother was making breakfast when the phone rang. It was an unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. It was Anya, her voice rushed and excited. "Turn on the news," she said. "Any channel. Just turn it on." Confused, the mother walked to the small television in the living room and turned the dial. A local morning news show was on, and there on the screen was a still image from the video, her two daughters singing on the street. The news anchor's voice was serious, talking about a disturbing video that has captured the heart of a city. The twins, woken by the noise, came and stood by their mother's side, their eyes wide as they saw their own faces on television. Their father came in, tying his tie for work, and stopped in his tracks. The three of them stood there, a family frozen in a moment of utter shock. The reporter was telling their story, but not the story of shame from the night before. This was a story of incredible talent and shocking cruelty. The reporter mentioned the hashtag Finch the Tyrant, and how it was trending not just in the city, but across the country. The father sank into a chair, his tie forgotten. The mother put her arms around her daughters, holding them tight. They were no longer just two girls singing for food. They were a symbol dot in a penthouse apartment high above the city. The man in the suit was sipping his coffee, looking out at the view he owned. He was in a good mood. The previous night's little display of power had been amusing. He enjoyed putting people in their place. His assistant entered the room, holding a tablet, his face pale and nervous. "Sir," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "there's something you need to see." The man turned, annoyed at the interruption. "What is it?" "I'm enjoying my coffee." His assistant held out the tablet. On the screen was the video. The man watched, a small smile on his face at first. He saw himself, powerful and in control. But then he kept watching. He saw the comments. He saw the hashtag with his name. His smile faded. "What is this nonsense?" he growled. "Some internet nonsense? Get my legal team on it. I want this video removed. I want to sue whoever posted it." "It's not that simple, sir," the assistant said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's everywhere. Every news channel is talking about it. A major company you were going to partner with just issued a statement saying they are reevaluating their relationship with you. Our stock is already down." The man snatched the tablet and scrolled, his face growing darker with every swipe. The world was turning against him. The power he thought he wielded so easily was now being used against him. He was a king who was suddenly being told by his entire kingdom that they no longer wanted him. He threw the tablet across the room, where it shattered against the wall. He was trapped in his gilded cage, and the walls were closing in. Back in the small apartment, the phone rang again. This time the father answered it, his voice cautious. The person on the other end introduced himself as a well-known music producer. He had seen the video. He wasn't interested in the controversy, he said. He was interested in the music. "Those voices," he said, his voice filled with a genuine awe. "They are once in a generation. I don't care about their story, I care about their talent. I want to offer them a professional recording session, my studio, my team. No strings attached. Just to let them sing." The father was speechless. He looked at his wife, his eyes wide with disbelief. He covered the phone and whispered, "It's a famous music producer. He wants to help the girls." The mother put a hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. This was beyond anything they could have imagined. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about their daughter's gift being recognized by someone who truly understood Dot as the day went on. The offers and requests continued to pour in. But the biggest call came in the late afternoon. It was from a producer for one of the biggest national morning television shows. They had seen the video, heard about the music producer's offer, and they wanted the twins to perform on their show, live in front of millions of people. The father took down the details, his hand shaking slightly as he wrote. When he hung up the phone, the room was silent. He looked at the piece of paper in his hand, then at his wife and daughters. It was a simple invitation, but it felt like a winning lottery ticket, a key to a door they never even knew existed. The evening news showed the millionaire leaving his office, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. He looked haggard, his perfect suit rumpled, his face a mask of fury and frustration. He got into his car, a sleek black cage that now felt less like a symbol of power and more like an escape. The camera then cut to a shot of the twins' apartment building, a simple brick building in a humble part of town. The two worlds, once so far apart, were now connected by a song. In that small apartment, a family huddled together, looking at a piece of paper that promised a new dawn. The man who had tried to crush them had inadvertently given them a stage bigger than any they could have ever dreamed of, and the world was waiting to hear them sing. The air backstage was thick with a kind of nervous energy the twins had never felt before. It wasn't the simple fear of a cold night or the worry of an empty stomach. This was a humming, buzzing vibration that seemed to come from the very walls of the television studio. People in headsets rushed past, speaking in quick, clipped sentences into microphones. Bright lights hung from the ceiling like a forest of artificial suns, making the air warm and smelling faintly of hot dust and electricity. The twins clung to each other's hands, their small fingers intertwined. They were dressed in simple, clean dresses, a gift from the show's producers, but they felt like they were wearing costumes from a play they didn't know the lines to. Their mother and father stood close by, their faces a mixture of terror and pride, their eyes never leaving their daughters. A man with a kind face and a headset around his neck knelt down in front of them. He was the producer of the show. "Okay, you two," he said, his voice calm and steady. "In just a minute, we're going to walk you out onto that stage. There will be a lot of people out there, and a lot of cameras. But I want you to forget all of that. Just look at each other, okay? And sing like you did on the street. Sing for each other. That's all that matters." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. It was the same kind of look Anya had given them, a look that said they were valued, not just for their talent, but for who they were. The older twin gave a small, determined nod. She squeezed her sister's hand. She felt the ukulele slung over her shoulder, its familiar weight a small comfort in this strange new world. The younger twin looked at her sister, her trust absolute. If her sister was brave, she could be brave too. Meanwhile, in a sprawling mansion on a hill that overlooked the entire city, the man in the suit sat alone in a vast, empty living room. The room was cold, filled with expensive furniture that no one ever sat on and art on the walls that no one ever looked at. The only light came from a giant television screen mounted on the wall. He had a glass of something expensive in his hand, but he hadn't touched it. He was watching the morning show, his face a hard mask of defiance. He had been forced to issue a public apology, a hollow statement written by a team of lawyers, but it had done nothing to stop the tidal wave of public outrage. His business deals were collapsing, his friends were no longer taking his calls, and his name had become a synonym for cruelty. He felt cornered like an animal, and his only defense was anger. He wanted to see them fail. He wanted the world to see that they were just two lucky children, a flash in the pan, a pathetic story that had been blown out of proportion. He wanted to see them prove him right. On the television, the host introduced the twins. They have captured the hearts of millions with their incredible talent and their inspiring spirit. Please welcome to our stage the singing twins. The producer gave the girls a final, encouraging nod, and a stagehand gently guided them towards a brightly lit opening. The walk to the center of the stage felt like the longest walk of their lives. The studio audience was a sea of shadowy faces in the sudden glare of the spotlights. It was completely silent. The twins walked to the two microphones that had been set up for them, small stools waiting beside them. They didn't sit. They stood side by side, just as they had on the street. The older twin took the ukulele from her shoulder. Her hands were sweating, but she took a deep breath, just as she had done 100 times before. She looked at her sister, and in that look she said, "*, we can do this." Her sister looked back, and her eyes said, "I'm with you." The man in the mansion leaned forward on his sofa, a cruel smirk on his lips, waiting for them to mess up. The older twin strummed the first chord. It was the same simple, clear chord from their song on the street. And then they began to sing. The first notes were a little hesitant, but as they fell into the harmony, their voices found their strength. The sound that filled the silent studio was not the sound of two frightened children. It was the sound of pure, unbreakable spirit. It was the same melody, but it was transformed. The haunting longing was still there, but it was no longer a cry of desperation. It was now a song of survival, of hope, of a promise kept. They sang with their eyes closed, pouring all the pain of the past few days, all the love for their family, and all the gratitude for the kindness they had received into every single note. In the audience, a woman in the front row dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. A tough-looking security guard standing by the stage had to turn away, his own vision blurring. The host of the show watched, his mouth slightly open, completely mesmerized. The cameras zoomed in on their faces, capturing the serene, powerful expression on the older twin's face and the quiet, fierce joy on the younger's. Back in the cold, empty mansion, the man's smirk had vanished. He watched the giant screen and, for the first time in a very long time, he truly listened. He heard the beauty he had so arrogantly dismissed. He saw the faces in the audience, the tears, the awe. He saw the two girls on the screen, their faces filled with a light that no amount of money could buy. He saw the love they had for each other, a bond so strong it could silence a room of millions. The glass in his hand felt heavy. The anger inside him began to crumble, replaced by something far more uncomfortable. It was a profound and aching emptiness. He had everything a person could possibly want, but as he listened to their song, he realized he had nothing of real value. He was alone in his fortress of wealth, and the sound of their harmonies was the sound of everything he had thrown away when the last note faded. There was a moment of absolute, breathless silence, and then the studio erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. A wave of sound so powerful it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The entire audience was on its feet, clapping, cheering, some with tears still streaming down their faces. The twins opened their eyes, shocked by the wall of sound that hit them. They looked at each other, their faces breaking into wide, incredulous smiles. They had done it. They hadn't just sung a song. They had shared their souls, and the world had listened. In the weeks that followed, their lives changed in ways they could never have imagined. The crowdfunding campaign that Anya had helped set up had raised over $500,000, a testament to the community that had formed around them. It was enough to pay off their parents' debts, move them into a comfortable new home, and ensure the girls would never have to sing for food again. The music producer kept his word, offering them a contract that was designed to protect them, to nurture their gift, and allow them to be children first and artists second. He became a mentor, a guardian of their incredible talent. As for the man, in the suit, his public apology was too little, too late. The damage was irreversible. His empire crumbled, his reputation in ruins, leaving him isolated in his empty mansion. He would sometimes turn on the television and see the twins' faces, see them performing at a charity event or accepting an award. He would watch them, a silent, hollow figure in a room full of things, and listen. He would listen to the song of two girls who had everything he lacked, a song that echoed the profound truth he had learned too late, that true wealth isn't counted in a bank account, but in the courage to share your soul with the world. Their song was no longer a cry for help. It was a declaration of joy, a melody that would play on long after his own world had gone silent.